Okay, let's unpack this. Imagine a courtroom, right? It's supposed to be, well, quiet, orderly.
Right. Deliberation. Law.
Exactly. But sometimes things just go completely off the rails. Picture this. A standard hearing, nothing too unusual, suddenly becomes this live-streamed viral sensation.
And it ends with the judge being arrested. Right there. On the bench.
It sounds like something out of a movie, honestly. But that's exactly the scenario laid out in the material you've shared with us.
It's a pretty staggering sequence of events. We've really dug into the sources you gave us, articles, notes, all of it, to get a handle on this clash between Pam Bondi, the former Florida AG, and Judge Carolyn West.
Yeah, so our mission here in this deep dive is to walk you through those key moments. We'll look at the people involved, the frankly shocking role social media played, and the major fallout from this whole judicial showdown.
Yeah.
And just to be clear, this is all based only on the material provided.
Absolutely. So let's set the scene as your sources describe it. Florida State Courthouse. Apparently there was a real buzz.
Anticipation.
Yeah, palpable anticipation for this specific case. It was a challenge to some new state election procedures, pretty controversial stuff.
And Pam Bondi arrives. Now, she's no stranger to big cases, given her background as AG.
Right, high profile's kind of her thing.
But this one, the sources point out, had eyes on it from all over the country. The material describes her arrival, the signature blonde hair, professional suit, navigating reporters, polite smile, basically saying the arguments would speak for themselves.
Classic politician move. And then the judge enters. 9 a.m. sharp, Judge Carolyn West. Her reputation, as laid out in the material, was as a fiercely progressive jurist.
Okay.
53 years old. And as she sits down and looks towards Bondi, the sources make a point of mentioning this unmistakable disdain she had right away.
Wow, okay, you can already feel the temperature dropping, can't you? So the hearing starts, and according to the material, the red flags, they popped up almost instantly.
Oh yeah, instantly. The sources say the judge kicked things off with this edge in her voice, maybe mispronouncing or maybe mocking Bondi's name.
And she didn't waste any time getting personal, did she?
Not at all. The sources describe her going right after Bondi, bringing up her amicus brief in that Texas versus Pennsylvania case.
Right, the one filed after the 2020 election.
That's the one. An amicus brief, for anyone listening, is basically a legal argument from someone not directly in the case, offering a perspective. And Judge West apparently called Bondi's brief quite the embarrassment.
Ouch. In open court.
In open court. And the material notes this caused some, uncomfortable laughter from the gallery. Bondi, though, the sources say she kept her composure, but her jaw visibly tightened.
And it just went downhill from there, didn't it?
Pretty much. As Bondi started arguing for the election procedures, the sources say Judge West muttered something loud enough for the front row to hear, characterizing the procedures as necessary to suppress votes more accurately.
Whoa. Okay, that's not subtle.
Not even close.
Yeah.
Bondi's co-counsel, James Harrington, apparently leaned in and whispered he thought the judge was actually trying to provoke her.
And if that was the plan, sounds like she doubled down. The sources say for the next half hour, as Bondi tried to lay out her case, Judge West just kept cutting her off.
Non-stop interruptions, sighs you could hear, dismissive hand waves. The works.
So how did she react when Bondi cited actual law precedent?
The sources describe eye-rolling, sarcastic remarks about creative interpretations. The atmosphere, based on the material, was getting seriously tense.
And then there was that moment with the Supreme Court decision. The sources really highlight this one.
Yeah, Bondi references a SCOTUS decision backing her point, and the material says Judge West literally laughed out loud. Laughed. And questioned if Bondi had maybe misread it or perhaps was just hoping she, the judge, hadn't read it.
Well, the level of condescension described is on something else.
Sick with it, the sources note. But through all this, the material consistently points out Bondi maintaining her dignity, staying professional despite just constant interruptions.
And that contrast must have been pretty stark for people there.
Absolutely. The sources say it was obvious to everyone, including the journalists present, that the judge's conduct was way over the line. Beyond unprofessional was the phrase used. It really set the stage for a proper confrontation.
Okay, so the confrontation arrives.
It does. After Bondi wraps up her initial points, Judge West reportedly leans back, takes off her glasses slowly, and says it was certainly entertaining.
Ugh, just dripping with sarcasm, I bet.
You can almost hear it. But she wasn't done with the personal bigs. She added she had expected more substance from someone of your political celebrity.
Oh, come on. And the gallery?
Some snickers, according to the sources.
Bondi tries to respond.
She does. Tries to address the celebrity jab, and the sources say West gives this dismissive wave, like, go ahead, but then throws in another punch, calling Bondi the architect of Flora's infamous stand-your-ground defense.
Okay, that's completely irrelevant to the election case.
Totally. And that's when Bondi's co-counsel, Harrington, steps up. The sources say he objected formally, called the comments inappropriate and prejudicial.
As he should have. How did the judge take that?
Not well. The sources describe her eyes narrowing, immediately threatening him with contempt if he didn't sit right back down.
Contempt, so disrespecting the court.
Exactly. The material describes Judge West's face getting flushed. She points at Bondi, accuses her of twisting case law to serve your political agenda.
Wow.
Claims this is what she always did as Attorney General. And then apparently she chuckled, looking out at the gallery, almost like seeking approval. Some people laughed, but nervously this time, the sources say.
And Bondi's reaction? Still composed.
Remarkably so, according to the material. Takes breath, calmly asks the judge to please focus on the legal arguments, not personal attacks.
Which probably just fanned the flames.
Bingo. According to the sources, that seemed to set Judge West off even more. Her voice gets louder, she accuses Bondi of crying persecution, playing the victim card, gesturing dramatically towards her.
Theatrics from the bench.
Big time. And the sources indicate the mood in the room shifted then. The nervous laughter stopped. People looked really uncomfortable. This was clearly, as the material puts it, beyond unprofessional.
So Harrington tries again.
He does. Insists the judge must recuse herself, step aside because of obvious bias.
And Judge West?
Denies it flat out. Slams the gavel down so hard, the sources say, people literally jumped. And threatens Harrington with contempt again.
So Harrington has to back down.
Looks like it. Bondi apparently put a hand on his arm, and he sat down, reluctantly. But the sources describe Judge West almost feeding off this tension. She then launches into what's described as a 10-minute monologue.
Not about the case law, I'm guessing.
Not even close. The material calls it a personal political speech, full of jabs at Bondi's politics, her affiliations, policies, described as barely disguising her personal animus and getting increasingly unhinged.
Unhinged. That's a strong word from the sources.
It is. And while this is going on, the sources mention this tiny detail. A young law clerk whispering something to the bailiff. Neither Bondi nor the judge noticed, but the bailiff apparently frowned deeply.
Interesting. Foreshadowing, maybe?
Perhaps. So after the judge finally winds down her speech, Bondi quietly asks for a recess. Just wants to consult her team.
Seems reasonable.
Judge West denies it. Smugly, the sources say, asks if Bondi is finding it difficult to defend the indefensible. Says they'll keep going until she says stop.
Man, the hostility, you could probably cut it with a knife.
Absolutely thick with it based on the sources. But here's the twist. Unknown to Bondi or the judge, this whole meltdown wasn't staying within the courtroom walls.
Here comes the social media angle.
Exactly, because in the back row, the material reveals there's this 24-year-old law student, Megan Davis.
Okay.
She'd propped up her iPhone, discreetly. She was just there for a seminar observing. But what she saw, she felt was, quote, too important to keep to herself.
So she started recording.
Even better. 40 minutes earlier, she'd started live streaming the whole thing on TikTok.
Live streaming on TikTok, a court proceeding.
Yep. Started with a few dozen viewers, then thousands. By the 2-hour mark, the sources say over 100,000 people were watching this judicial meltdown in real time.
Incredible. Just incredible.
And it didn't stop there. Clips started flying. Snippets of Judge West's outrageous moments, as people online called them.
Spreading everywhere.
Like wildfire. Twitter, other platforms, hashtags like hashtag Karen Judge. Yeah, they went there. Hashtag judicial misconduct, hashtag Pam Bondi trial started trending nationally.
Hashtag Karen Judge.
Yeah. The sources specifically mentioned one 30-second clip that went huge. It showed West mocking Bondi's speaking style, then cutting her off.
And the contrast.
It's stark. Bondi's calm professionalism, as the material describes it, next to the judge's behavior. According to the sources, it earned Bondi a ton of sympathy online.
What were people saying online? The sources mentioned comments.
Oh, yeah. Intense reactions. Worst judge I've ever seen. This is insane. Legal experts who saw the stream started weighing in too, expressing shock at the conduct, suggesting the judge should be removed immediately.
And this online storm It had real-world effects. Quickly.
Amazingly fast, based on the sources. By noon that same day, the story pushed by these viral clips reached judicial oversight committees. You know, the groups that investigate judges.
The Judicial Qualifications Commission, things like that.
Exactly. And the state Supreme Court. Clerks were apparently discreetly showing the clips to their bosses. Senior court officials started making concerned calls to each other.
And Bondi's team. Did they know this was happening?
They started passing her notes about it, yeah.
Hmm.
But the sources say she stayed laser-focused on presenting her case, just methodically laying out her arguments despite everything.
It just kept going.
She did. There's another clip the sources highlight, another one that went viral. It's where Bondi calmly pushes back when the judge makes it personal again.
How so?
The judge asks defensively, like, "Are you saying I can't be impartial?" And Bondi just replies, basically, "I'm just saying we should focus on the law, Your Honor. The court's personal feelings about me aren't really relevant to the Constitution."
Smooth. And that went viral.
Instantly. The sources say it was framed online as a masterclass in professional restraint meeting unbridled judicial hostility.
Okay, so day one ends. What's the vibe when they come back for day two after lunch?
Totally different atmosphere, based on the sources. Courtroom is absolutely packed, people whispering, checking their phones, even though they're not supposed to.
Everyone knows what's going on online.
Oh, yeah. Bondi and her team are described as serious, but still composed. But her office, the sources note, is now getting calls from major news networks. The story had blown up.
And Judge West? How does she seem?
She came in 5 minutes late, reportedly. That earlier smugness. The sources say it was still there, but tinged with a brittle edge. Barely made eye contact with Bondi.
Did she acknowledge the viral videos?
She did, right away. Called it an orchestrated media campaign. Threatened contempt for anyone else trying to undermine these proceedings.
Doubling down again.
Pretty much. Then Bondi formally asked for a recess, said she needed to file a motion about the judge's conduct, objecting to how things were being handled.
And the judge's response? Let me guess. Denied.
Sharply denied. Called it a delay tactic. Threatened contempt again if Bondi pushed it. It's all there in the sources.
Unbelievable. Meanwhile, what else is happening? You mentioned a former clerk.
Right. Martha Collins. While this is going on in the courtroom, she's apparently in the back composing a tweet.
What did she say?
Said she wasn't surprised by the judge's behavior, that West had a long history of using her courtroom as a political platform, called it standard operating procedure, and that tweet, the sources say, just spread like wildfire.
So the public firestorm is raging, but behind the scenes, investigations were starting, fueled by the clips.
Exactly. The visibility from those viral clips kicked things into high gear, according to the sources. Emma Chen, she's an investigative reporter at the Tampa Bay Times, 15 years on the judicial beat. She saw the clips and apparently thought, this is it. A golden opportunity.
To do what?
By 6 p.m. on day one, she'd put a team together. They started digging through Judge West's cases from the past decade, specifically looking at political cases, searching for patterns of bias in her rulings, the language she used.
And across town, you mentioned another reporter.
Marcus Washington, veteran legal affairs guy for the Herald. He gets contacted independently by 3 former law clerks for Judge West. They saw the clips too.
3 former clerks. What did they say?
The sources detail their accounts, said the judge would brag about rulings before hearings even happened, called lawyers she didn't like conservative idiots or right-wing zealots in private, saw herself not as impartial, but as a progressive warrior.
Wow. In her chambers.
Apparently so. And one of them, the sources say, was ready to sign an affidavit, a sworn statement.
That's serious. But there was something even more damaging, right? The sources mentioned emails.
Yes. The biggest bombshell, according to the material, came from an anonymous source, called themselves Courthouse Eyes.
Intriguing name. What did they provide?
Screenshots. Emails from Judge West's personal email account, sent to progressive activist groups.
Oh, boy.
And the sources highlight one specific exchange from 3 years prior. West writes to a voting rights group about an upcoming case, the Johnson case. She says, and I'm quoting from the material here, "Don't worry about the Johnson case. I'll make sure the outcome supports our cause. Just make sure your legal arguments give me enough cover."
Oh, my God. Give me enough cover. That's basically admitting bias and coordination.
The sources say Washington's hand was literally shaking when he read it, if those emails were real. This wasn't just misconduct anymore. This was potential criminal conspiracy to pervert the course of justice.
Interfering with the legal process on purpose?
Exactly. And crucially, the sources state the emails are authenticated. Overnight.
So, day 2 morning. Judge West is getting ready to resume the hearing.
And both newspapers hit publish. Tampa Bay Times at 7:45 a.m. Fiery Judge West, history of biased rulings revealed. Herald follows 20 minutes later with their bombshell, the clerks, the emails.
In social media.
Exploded again. Hashtag Karen Judge became hashtag corrupt judge. Cable news channels were booking the former clerks. Other lawyers started sharing their own stories about West.
Like who? Any examples in the sources?
Yeah, a former state prosecutor, Alexandra Diaz, went on morning TV, talked about West trying to get charges dropped against a company because they were good environmental donors.
This is all breaking while Judge West is heading to court. Did she know?
Apparently not. The sources say she told her staff, don't bring me that internet nonsense. Saw the news vans, got annoyed, but figured it was just because of Bondi's celebrity.
Completely oblivious.
Yeah.
But others weren't.
Far from it. The sources revealed that 3 floors above her, federal officials were meeting with the Chief Justice, court administrators. They were looking at all the evidence gathered in just the last 12 hours.
Including the authenticated emails.
Especially the emails. That coordination described, it apparently pushed federal authorities to act incredibly fast.
So while she's preparing to take the bench,
A sealed federal warrant was signed. Not just for state judicial misconduct. Federal charges.
what were the specific charges listed in the sources?
Conspiracy against rights. That's under Title 18. Interfering with constitutional rights. Obstruction of justice. And wire fraud. Tied directly to those emails about coordinating case outcomes.
Wire fraud because it used electronic communication, the emails.
Precisely. So Pam Bondi and her team are walking towards the courtroom, focused, unaware of the storm about to break. Bondi reportedly told her co-counsel, whatever happens, we stick to the law. That's what matters.
9 a.m. courtroom 305. What's the scene?
Packed. Overflowing. News of day one drew a massive crowd. Bondi is at the table reviewing notes. She'd seen the headlines, but told her team, focus.
And Judge West enters.
9:05 a.m., according to the sources. Face like a mask of judicial authority. No sign she knows about. The articles, the emails, the federal meeting upstairs.
What does she say first?
Addresses the court, mentions Bondi's objections from the day before, dismisses them, then goes right back to attacking the orchestrated media campaign, threatens contempt again for anyone trying to undermine these proceedings.
Still defiant?
Completely. Bondi stands up to object to that characterization, but before she can really get going, the big oak doors at the back swing open.
Dun, dun, dun.
Pretty much. In walks a tall U.S. Marshal, uniformed. Followed by 2 agents in plain clothes, he walks straight down the aisle right towards the bench.
And the judge's reaction?
Irritation, according to the sources, tries to wave him off. Court's in session, your business can wait.
But the marshal keeps coming.
Steady advance, calmly says, my business cannot wait. The whole courtroom goes dead silent, the sources say.
What does the judge do then?
Hisses it's outrageous, orders the bailiff to escort the marshal out. But the bailiff, a 20-year veteran, according to the sources, just stands there, frozen, looking at the marshal's face.
He knew something serious was up.
Looked like it. The marshal reaches into his jacket, pulls out an official document, sealed envelope. Judge Carolyn West, he announces, I have a federal warrant that I need to serve immediately.
Served right there, on the bench.
Right there. The sources describe the color draining from Judge West's face. A warrant. This is absurd. You can't interrupt court to serve papers.
But he can.
I'm afraid I can and must, Your Honor, the marshal replies, holding out the envelope. Authorized by the federal district court.
She takes it.
Reluctantly, the sources say. Her hands are visibly trembling as she reads it. Her expression apparently goes from indignant to shocked to just sheer fear.
And she says,
Stammering, according to the sources, This can't be. On what grounds?
and the marshal reads the charges out loud.
Yeah, it's loud enough for everyone. Conspiracy against rights under Title 18, obstruction of justice, and wire fraud related to communications regarding cases in your courtroom.
The reaction in the gallery.
Gasps, murmurs erupting. Journalists, the sources say, were already typing furiously on their phones, sending the news out.
How does West react to the charges being read?
Loses it, basically.
Yeah.
Face flushed bright red, yelling, this is politically motivated persecution. I am a sitting judge.
And the marshal's response.
Calm, collected. And no one is above the law, Your Honor. Then asks her to step down from the bench. Now.
Does she comply?
Not at first. This is outrageous. Voice rising to a near shriek, reportedly. You cannot arrest a judge in her own courtroom. Do you have any idea who I am?
Famous last words.
Pretty much. The marshal just says, yes, ma'am, I do. You're Carolyn West, subject of a federal arrest warrant. Please step down.
She still resists.
Doesn't move. The agents start moving towards her. She yells, "Don't touch me! Judicial interference! Attack on the courts!"
This is intense.
One agent speaks quietly but firmly, according to the sources, tells her she can come with dignity or they'll use restraints. Her choice, but she is coming.
And that does it.
Seems so. After a tense moment where it looked like she might actually physically resist, she just slumps, defeated, mutters something like, "Fine, but I'll be filing complaints against everyone."
And she steps down. Miranda writes.
Yep. The marshal reads her rights, then reaches for the handcuffs.
Handcuffs on a judge in robes.
Fresh horror on her face, according to the sources. "Surely that's not necessary," she protests. "I'm an officer of the court."
And the marshal.
"Standard procedure, Your Honor." Secures the cuffs. The sources really emphasize that image. Judge, robes, handcuffs, being led away.
Does she say anything else as she's let out?
As they guide her towards the exit, she spots Pam Bondi still standing there. Their eyes meet, the sources say. Bondi's calm. West's filled with rage and humiliation. West reportedly hisses at Bondi, "This is your doing. You'll regret this."
And Bondi.
Says nothing, according to the sources. Just maintains a neutral expression. Watches the judge get escorted out of the room that was just her domain. Doors close. Silence.
Stunned silence, I imagine.
For a few seconds. Then, the sources say, like a dam breaking. Chaos. Reporters bolting, spectators talking loudly, court staff just bewildered.
And outside.
Bedlam is how the sources describe it. News helicopters already overhead, reporters everywhere, social media platforms apparently actually crashed for a bit from the traffic, millions watching clips of her arrest.
The reactions must have been off the charts.
Immediate, widespread, legal analysts calling it unprecedented. Those compilation videos started popping up. Karen Judge gets what she deserves. Judicial bias backfires. All over trending pages.
Any specific moments from the arrest go viral?
The sources mention observer accounts being shared widely, like the exchange where West supposedly said, "You can't arrest a judge," and the marshal just replied, "Yes, ma'am, we can."
So, back inside the courtroom, what happens next?
A temporary replacement judge gets appointed pretty quickly, and his first move, according to the sources, grants a one-week recess in the Bondi case. Why? To restore decorum and fairness.
And the reaction to that?
Spontaneous applause from the gallery, the sources note.
What about Pam Bondi? How does she handle leaving the courthouse?
Emerged about an hour later, walked calmly through the media storm, paused, gave a short statement, focused purely on the legal process, saying the system works best when everyone, including judges, follows the law. Refused any comment on West's situation specifically.
And as she left, more social media buzz.
Yep, a new hashtag started trending. Hashtag Pam Bondi. The sources really emphasize this point, the stark contrast between West's behavior, now seen by millions, and Bondi's composure resonated way beyond typical political lines.
Okay, fast forward 1 week. What's the situation then?
Pam Bondi holds a press conference, announces the case concluded after a fair hearing before an impartial judge, got the legal outcome they wanted. But she adds, the whole thing sparked a necessary conversation about judicial conduct, about the trust placed in judges.
And the broader fallout for Judge West and the system.
Significant, according to the sources, that Judicial Qualifications Commission launched full reviews of West's past rulings, dozens might be appealed now, and 3 other judges, ones with histories of similar conduct, voluntarily recused themselves from sensitive cases. Didn't want the same scrutiny.
They saw the writing on the wall.
Seems like it. As for former Judge West, still in federal custody, denied bail, prosecutors apparently showed evidence she tried contacting witnesses. Her fall, the sources say, was total and swift. Respected jurist to inmate number 47291 in just 7 days.
Wow. Inmate number. And Bondi, how did this affect her public image?
An unexpected renaissance in public opinion is how the sources put it. Even people who are normally critics acknowledge her professionalism under pressure, her focus on legal principles, not making it personal.
How did she wrap up that press conference?
Said something like, "In my 30 years of public service, I've always believed truth prevails when we focus on facts, not personalities. What happened wasn't about me or Judge West. It was about whether we truly believe in equal justice under law."
Powerful closing. Any final details from the sources?
Just one symbolic little tidbit. As she steps away from the mics, her phone buzzes. A notification. Major streaming service wants the rights to her story. Tentative documentary title. One judge's Gavel Rogie.
Gavel Rogue. Okay, that's quite the title. What a journey the sources lay out for us.
It really is. You go from this Very contentious courtroom, clearly marked by bias, according to the sources, to this viral explosion on social media, then serious investigative reporting fueled by leaks, and finally, a federal arrest right there on the bench.
Yeah, this deep dive, based entirely on the material you provided, it really does throw a spotlight on how judicial misconduct, when it suddenly becomes incredibly visible, thanks to technology, can lead to accountability surprisingly fast.
And it sparks that bigger conversation about conduct and power within the justice system.
It also shows you just how quickly things can cascade, right?
Yeah.
How all these different information streams, the official record, the raw social media feed, the investigative journalism, the anonymous tips, they all sort of converged here to paint a much bigger, much more troubling picture than just what was happening initially in Courtroom 305.
Absolutely. It all came together.
So this whole incident, as detailed in your sources, it really leaves you with a pretty provocative question to chew on, doesn't it? What does this whole drama tell us about how transparency and public scrutiny are changing venerable institutions like the judiciary? And maybe more importantly, how do we ensure that kind of accountability for abuses of power while still protecting the necessary independence that courts need to function?